This video is just to look at questions that are likely to come up in the next paper, the IGCSE Edexcel paper 4. If you were to wish to download any of the questions or have a lesson on these questions or get the answers, then do visit my website by clicking on the card at the top right hand corner of the screen, or wait to the end of the video to see the web link. Anyway, this year we've had a difficult first paper, a few questions that hadn't been on for quite a number of years, and the sequence series hadn't been on for about 10 years, made an appearance and probably called a few out. So I will look at some questions that maybe you might not think would come up, so just check through those. Anyway, one obvious one that's likely to come up is a fractions question when you do a show that. Remember, you've got to be able to find common denominators and show how you do that. And in the division, you've got to show how to make it top heavy and then turn the second fraction upside down. Next topic I think will come up, probably lowest common multiples, and finding products of prime factors will also come up. Obviously, if you're going to be looking at lowest common multiples, the highest common factor also will be a question that was very likely to come up too. This is likely to come up, will be a bonus. You just put the numbers into your calculator, make sure it looks exactly on the display with the modern calculators it does on the paper, and then press equals. Obviously, you've got to be able to round your numbers too. We did have some indices in paper 1, but we didn't have any indices with algebra involved, so I think we may well get one of those as well. Recurring decimals are very likely to turn up. You've got to show all the working. Remember, you've got to be multiplying by 10, 100 or 1000 and then subtracting and then dividing to do your recurring decimals questions. Surds, definitely going to be making an appearance. You might just get a standard question like these two, where you've just got to actually do the manipulation and find out the letters. Or you may get something a bit more interesting, where you've got to use and apply your maths with the surds. Sets will definitely make an appearance. You'll get maybe just going through the notation of sets and trying to build up sets. But of course, Venn diagrams will probably make an appearance. Do remember, n means the number of things in there. So this 7 here is going to mean there's 7 things in that area. So when you see that n, do be wary and do read the question carefully. There were some percentages in the first paper, but I'm not sure there wasn't any repeated percentages, so maybe they might repeat pardon the pun, they might do another percentage question and have repeated percentages. And the other percentage questions I think you ought to be aware of, there was no undoing of percentages. So going backwards, remember you need to work out a scale factor or multiplier depending on how you've been taught, and then divide by that scale factor or multiplier to get your original value. Right, now on to the algebra section of questions. We just covered all the numerical ones. We're going to look at the algebra next. There wasn't much in the way of multiplying out and solving in the first. Do expect also to be asked to build up an equation in using your algebra, and use your knowledge of other theorems like angle theorems and perimeters and areas to build up equations in the second. You will have to use your knowledge of other areas of maths probably to try and form a quadratic. So in this case we've got Pythagoras' theorem. If you put all the things in, you will get this quadratic. Actually, in this one's actually a hidden simultaneous equation with quadratics in it, because you're going to use one equation with perimeter, okay, and you're going to use another equation with the Pythagoras, which will create the quadratic. You may have a question that starts off with finding quadratics and moving into calculus, so do be aware of that. We have not had a rearrangement of an equation, so do practice some of those. We haven't had any simplification of algebraic fractions of this nature either. This is quite a simple one, but there are more difficult ones. You will have to probably have to substitute values in to get into your equation, so you've got to be able to substitute values in. You may get the quadratic simultaneous equation not hidden, so know that you've got to substitute the 3x plus 2 in where the y is to do these. Haven't been any inequalities so far, so make sure you can do these. Quadratic inequality comes up every now and then. You need to realize there's going to be two sections to this, okay? X will be less than 4, but it will also be bigger than minus 4. Make sure you understand why that is. Another type of inequality question you're likely to get is where you've got to draw the graph. My tip for this type of question is always to shade out the area you don't want and then label your region. It makes it a lot easier. I said it was calculus before, you probably know it better as differentiation, definitely going to come up in the second paper. And you will have to be able to find out where minimums are and know the reasons for minimums and maximums too. And there's lots of different types of questions they can ask differentiation. Find the gradient, find where it's maximum or minimum, find where the gradient is getting less, or sorry, not the gradient is getting less, where the slope is negative or positive. Okay. And this special application differentiation to displacement, velocity and acceleration doesn't come up very often, so it could catch you out if you don't revise it. Okay, now we're going to move on to looking at data handling questions that are likely to come up in paper 4. And the first type of question that didn't really come up has nothing to do with angles and polygons, so I suggest you work on your angles and polygons. Another typical angles question you might want to know, parallel lines. As I said before, being able to work out equations and values from the shape and using algebra with angles will be important as well too. Working out interior angle sums and using the exterior angle and interior angle formula will also be important, and as well as end-sided shapes. This style of question has become a favourite lately, where they actually give you the interior and exterior angles. Well, they give you the ratios of them, and you've got to realise that they add those two, call one x, and they add up to 180, and then the rest of the problem is quite straightforward from there. You'll need to know the formula for sectors, so areas of sector. Okay, and also the arc length of a sector, you'll need to know the formula. And this one, you're obviously going to be using triangles and the sector formula to try and work out the area of this segment. Combining two types of formulas together, we've got a sector here and we've got a triangle, which we'll use the area of a triangle rule or cosine. Actually, I think it is area of shape, so you're going to need to use the area of a triangle rule using a half AB sine C will help you here. There wasn't any surface areas and volumes questions, so do have a look at these. I'll show you a few more of this type. Here we go, there's another one. And you might even have to combine some. It'd be worth practicing the more difficult ones too. You don't know whereabouts in the paper is going to come. Here, where you've got to do some elimination, or you're just working with R's in different shapes, all being the same, but then you're using different formulas and you're going to try and work out what the value of R is using your formula. Speed, distance, time questions don't feature every year, but they haven't featured on this paper so far, so worth making sure you're up to speed. Another one doesn't happen very often, bearings, but again you do need to be aware just in case it comes up. Make sure you understand what a bearing is. Constructions, you'll need to understand how to do constructions. Don't come up every year, but they do come up most years. You need to know angle bisectors, perpendicular bisector, a right angle to a point near a line, how to construct angles of 30, 45 and 60 degrees, and any geometric shape which you can use those constructions on, you'll need to be able to do. I will try and upload a video onto my channel later on which actually shows you how to do all those basic constructions. Transformations will feature prominently, rotations, enlargements, translations and reflections. You need to know all those four. You need to know all the ways of all the parts of the description. For example, for rotation you need to know the center, the angle and the direction that you're going to rotate, and need to obviously state the type of transformation it is. Although there was an angle theorem, circle theorem rather, although there was a circle theorem on the original paper, I still feel there's capacity for another one to appear. I used to think there's only one a year, then one year they brought up 3 or 4, so I think it was just a subtle one, it was a hidden one, you had to draw an extra line in paper 1 to find it, but I still think there's a capacity to ask a few more questions on circle theorems. So I'll just make sure you're up to speed on all the other ones which haven't come up yet. I don't think angle in a semicircle equals a right angle will come up because that's already done. So if you want to know what all the circle theorems are, there is a video on here set to, I think Firestarter did the music to, which goes through all the circle theorems in case you can't remember them. Intersecting chords, make sure you understand that theorem. It doesn't come up every year, but it does come up most years, so look out for one of those as well. And there's another one. Similar shapes have yet to make an appearance, and they come up every year, so do look out for that one. Also be aware of the area scale factor. If you're given the area of 1, what's the area scale factor? You should know that it's the length scale factor squared. It's quite possible you could do this with volumes. Okay, so volume scale factor is the length scale factor cubed, and obviously cubed root to go backwards and square root to go backwards for areas. Sine and cosine rules still to come up, as well as the area of a triangle is equal to a half AB sine C, so where you don't have a right angle. That's still yet to come up too. Right, moving on to data handling. There's a few data handling questions already come up we don't need to worry about, like histograms and means. Some of the mean questions that you got on, so you got weighted mean came up. So I'm going to look at some of the data handling questions that have not come up. Groot data has not come up at all yet, so you could have this one where you've got to work out cumulative frequency in the cumulative frequency graph. Make sure when you do cumulative frequency graphs that you know how to find the upper quartile, the lower quartile, the interquartile range and the median, and how to find things which are greater than or less than certain values. Groot mean again, so take using the midpoint to estimate the mean. That's why it's called an estimate, because you're taking the midpoint rather than using any individual values to find the mean. Make sure you know how to do that. And don't confuse it with taking total snow, in this case snowfall, or finding out the total amount. Often people calculate the mean when they mean the total, because check back to the question, is it the total they want? Or was it the mean time that they wanted? Okay, going on to probability. We've had some probability already, and I just highlighted a few types haven't come up. This is one of the more easy problems, or easier should I say, where you've got to work out all the probabilities add up to 1, so you can work out the missing probability. And then also the expected number of times you expect things to occur given the probability. So you need to be able to do that too. Do be aware of conditional probability problems where the probability of the previous event will affect the probability of the next event. So if you don't replace something, the probability changes for the second time when you're taking cards out of a pack and things like that. And do make sure you understand how to use a tree diagram and how to complete a tree diagram. And here's an example of a slightly more complicated tree diagram you could get too. And yes, and I can bring that good old friend algebra into probability questions as well. If you want to find out more, if you want to be able to download my sheets or get any help on any of these questions, then click on the link to my website at the end of the video, or the card you can just see just the top right. You can click there and get access to the links to my website where you can get these worksheets that I've done and the answers, or even see the video recordings of the lessons I've done on these worksheets.